Welcome back to Kings of the North. Doug Lesmerises and our special guest, Stephen Godfrey, to open the show. Godfrey, good to see you, brother.
Good morning. Good afternoon. Oh, good afternoon on the East Coast.
Yeah. You're in Tennessee.
I'm in Central Time.
We're in Ohio. You're in Central Time. We are here to talk about a really big G5 game on Friday night that does involve a Northern team in Boise State against UNLV. And but we don't just get to talk about the game. We want to talk about where things stand with the group of five in this playoff system. And my question has always been, Stephen, when might we see, what would it look like if we see a 12 seed beating a 5 seed in that first round? So that's what we're going to do. And then later in this show, just for everybody, Bill Landis and I are going to break down two really big games for the ACC and Big 12 races. We'll do Pitt and Syracuse, which is a Thursday night game, and Cincinnati and Colorado, which is a Saturday night game. And the winners of those games are very much in those races, and the losers are probably out. So some really interesting eliminators that this 12-team playoff has made possible for us to care that much about Cincinnati, Colorado, and Pitt-Syracuse. Isn't it wonderful, Godfrey? Those are actually big games.
Is your line for the North include Cincinnati but exclude Louisville?
It does. Wow. So there's a latitude, 38.5 degrees latitude. All right. So we drew it. There's because everything in life, I always say, there's always a place in a storm where here it's raining and 6 inches over it's not raining.
Yeah, right.
There are lines all around us. So sometimes people get upset when you draw lines. We have to draw a line somewhere. Okay. So we did draw that line, but
I am
Louisville's closed.
Yeah.
Louisville's closed.
Yeah, I know I'm not here to talk about Cincinnati.
Ohio.
I've been highly critical of that hire, and I think Cincinnati could do better, but alas.
And I went to a Cincinnati game. I went to Cincinnati game in week 2, and all the Cincinnati fans basically said that, and now they're 5-2, and their 2 losses are by a combined 4 points, and they're playing a banger at Colorado on Saturday night that should have every Cincinnati fan jacked. So you were not alone. You were not alone in that observation.
Yeah,
but this is they have a really good year. They have a good offensive line. They can run the ball. Brendan Sorsby's played well. Dante Corleone's back. This is
they beat Towson by 2 points.
They're good. They're good, but also
2 points.
And Georgia beat Kentucky by 1 point, and then Kentucky lost to Florida.
And Towson and Kentucky are the same thing.
Vanderbilt beat Alabama and was tied at 14 going into the fourth quarter against Ball State. So I didn't say
mighty Vanderbilt.
I didn't say they were perfect, but 5-2. I think they were a 5.5 win total going into the year, and they're 5-2, going to play a game at Colorado that matters for the conference race in late October. I think you'll take that if you're Cincinnati, especially where a lot of people were coming into the year. This is far exceeding what people thought Cincinnati would be coming into the year. Do you agree with that?
No, only because I think they're about to get murdered in the stretch. I think they are inferior to every opponent they play down the stretch. And only because, and I guess these are technically Northern teams, I think they haven't seen K-State yet. They haven't played.
Technically, they're the heart of the North. K-State and Iowa State. Yeah.
Okay.
Huge.
All right, cool. Coming. Yeah. Farmageddon. I love it. I love it. It's just, I think it was it's a weirdly timed schedule for them. I don't know of a conference right now that has a good handle on scheduling. I think we've just seen some weird lopsided results. I just got done talking on Split Zone Duo about how, for everything the Big Ten wanted to do for scheduling parity, there's been one Ohio State game to pay attention to this year, which I think is a disservice to the Bucks. And I just think it's what they were trying to avoid in the first place. I know we're off topic here, but it's got to be addressed moving forward. It's got to be, you've got to find some balance and a distribution of challenge for that top 30 sector of programs. It is one thing I think the SEC has done better early in this Big 2 era.
It was very difficult that Ohio State was basically not part of the college football conversation for the first month.
Yes,
but
that's what I'm saying.
Next year they open with Texas at home. So
that's what you got to do.
Some of the stuff gets fixed, but I agree with you. But also, it can be very difficult. For instance, coming into the year, when you're going through the most interesting Big 12 games, you were pointing at all the games involving Utah and Kansas and saying that's interesting, that matters, and now they don't. Now you look at teams who still have Kansas and Utah left to play, and you're like, well, those are wins. And so, sometimes who you think is going to matter doesn't matter.
Well, definitely. And the Big 12, and I say this lovingly, is organized like a Vegas buffet. It's 2 a.m. and you're like, I want crab claws and Fruity Pebbles, and there better be an ice cream at the end of it, and also a cheeseburger. You're drunk, you have this random assemblage of items. They're all good and interesting. Arizona State above average this season. K-State, I think, could actually be a very difficult playoff team in this whole mentality of it's just going to be the Big Two. It's just going to be the Big Two. But as a whole, they don't really mean anything together.
But I think they're okay with that. Because if they're the 2 a.m. Vegas buffet, so you have your choice of shows, right? You can either go see Larry the Cable Guy, and he is funny. He's in the Cars movie, man. He's the tow truck. Or you can go see
I have 3
Celine
kids.
Dion.
I know who Mater is.
Yeah. You can go see Celine Dion. She's from Canada. Yeah. So you can go see your big show South or your big show North. But then they're hoping when you're done, you want to go to the buffet at 2 a.m. So I think they're okay with that.
I got bad news for you. You ready?
Near.
You ready?
Far. Yes.
Do you know where Larry the Cable Guy's from?
Oh, my God.
He's Wisconsin? Yours, baby. Nebraska. He's yours, baby.
Come on.
Pawnee City, Nebraska, and he's a huge Huskers fan.
Have you ever seen like the Larry the Cable Guy stand up where he's wearing a cardigan and doing
where he's not Larry the Cable Guy?
And then he's like, this is not working.
If anything, that is cultural appropriation of my people, because
how about that?
That guy was a club comedian for a long time and figured out, I'm going to just synthesize the Foxworthy bit.
Yeah.
And then put on the cut. It was all a riff. It was all a bit. Like, I'm going to take the flannel shirt and cut it off and do this hybrid accent that's not technically Southern because it also passes for like Wisconsin. And all of a sudden it's the guy took a one-note character that he was not and then turned it famous. But yeah, he's not Southern at all. He passes the snowblower test.
He does. How dare people culturally appropriate the South? I hate when that happens. That is not cool. Let's talk about Boise.
Is the hat always within arm's reach?
Hell yeah, it is. What are we talking about? I got 2 swords and a hat.
I'm on
That's all I got.
Kings of the North, and we both have on Georgia shirts. I'm just going to pan down. This is the team I grew up cheering for.
Can I please be clear? Yours is real. Mine is ironic. That is
real, yes.
Okay. So
and I'm pretty sure this. Yeah, I'm pretty sure this came at the expense of Youngstown State. So I'm sorry.
And you are wearing a cardigan. So you're like half old
I
Larry
took that from the North.
Half new Larry the Cable Guy. You are right down the middle of what he is and what he was. Let's talk about UNLV Boise State on Friday night at 10:15 Eastern, I believe it is. How big is this game? Is this like the biggest G5 game? However we'd want to talk about power conferences, non-power, whatever. Is this like the biggest game of this sort? Like not Cincinnati, Notre Dame, not where one of them's a big time ever, where it's 2 schools like this and people are going to care more than they've ever cared?
Not ever. I think because of KOTN's sort of fixation on annexing, I think you're doing a disservice to the American, which was more Southern heavy in its previous iteration during the 4-team era, where you had rotational games that, like, because of the ascendancy of Tulane, of Houston, of Central Florida, you had matchups of this caliber and of this consequence before. I will say, now that we're contextualizing everything in the 12-team era, this is different. It feels different. Yeah. I have long been sort of really pushed my career along by, when I was a young reporter, we've talked about this off air, like going to G5 schools, north, south, east, west, whatever, finding coaches before people were talking about. That's how I developed sourcing as a national college football reporter. I am very pro G5. I grew up on what is now the G5, and I like that. I like everything about it. I don't think this is going to be a great game. I don't want to kill it, but
on the field or
on the field.
What do you think of the buildup? What do you think of the attention? What do you think of college football?
I hate that it's on Friday night. Like,
I like that it's on Friday night because if this is at 3:30 on Saturday, I think it gets buried by the SEC and the Big Ten.
Yes, but that is true.
So give it a spotlight.
Thursday. Like I think the Eastern time kickoff kills it. Like the 10:30 Eastern kills it. And that's a whole debate, and it destroyed an entire conference technically. These kickoff times. However, for what it is, I love at any level a styles clash, and fundamentally that's what we have in terms of offensive philosophy here, right?
But I also think, do we not have more of a story to these two teams? Because Boise State has the Heisman favorite, and UNLV had the defining situation of the NIL era. It was like the first blow in what people are. And those two things happened this year, and they're both good teams. And this is not quite a play-in game for a playoff spot, but pretty close for October in the 20s. I just think there is so much here, so much more. And no offense to Tulane and the American and Houston and what, I get it, but like from the standpoint of, I think the casual college football fan knows Ashton Genty, and I think a decent of them know what happened with UNLV, and that's a starting point, and then go watch some good ball.
I don't disagree with any of this. I just think that because of the way these two teams play, I think once I could be wrong, and I'm definitely discounting the sort of cluster score ability of UNLV and the fact they are reliant on turnovers. Usually when you see a team that's reliant on turnovers, your instinct when they go to play an opponent of a higher caliber is you can't rely on that luck. If we define turnovers as fundamentally luck, then eventually you get to a point where you're going to say, hey, let's pull that out of the equation here, right? By the way, the Texas State UTSA game probably had equal footing in week 2, and it fell apart. Just another Southern G5 shout out. I think not familiar with Texas. Not familiar. Okay, great. I'll talk G5 all day. I was trying to think of historic MAC matchups because that actually used to be the case. The problem,
I know,
is that they just had nothing to do with the result because it was the BCS era and it never bore anything, these great games. So to your point, I love the buildup. I wish there was more. I love the stakes that you've set. When you get on the field, I think that's what makes me a little sad as someone who pushes the G5 identity is that Boise is the most big boy or power 2 team philosophically that we've seen in years. And I think it's why I think you would give an exemption to the idea that emotion carries the removal of an interim tag on a head coach. That was not the case with Danielson. Talking with people at Boise last year during the coaching cycle, it was much more about like, hey, this guy structurally has a philosophy that's line oriented on both sides. We still have the ability as Boise State to recruit both the portal and high schools to develop like that and to be a defensive first team. This is before they realized they had a Heisman I mean, this guy we might be talking about the next running back for the Dallas Cowboys right now. I mean, that's how good this kid is. He's legit.
Absolutely.
To refashion Boise away from the Chris Peterson deviations, right? All of the guys who followed Pete were in some way, shape, or form. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to get in the margins and beat almost everybody in the Pac-12 on California talent. We're going to pull some developmental stuff. We're going to be shift. We're going to be motion. And then we're going to be what they would say as sort of press conference physical, but what they really mean is enough to match up and scare P5 teams who weren't ready for it. The problem is we adapted. We as college football, we hyped Boise up in the Blue Turf era, and they sort of fell by the wayside. They stopped being so surprising. This mentality, this Boise team, this is a team that can hang with a variety of other programs, including something as different as UNLV, because they're going to grind this thing out. They're going to dictate tempo and pace. They want to play a 7-possession game, 6 possessions. This is the philosophy of like Stanford at the height of it. So like after the Harbaugh transition, right? Like we are going to get big physical with 2 tight end sets. We like 12. We want to mash. And at the same time, we're going to just look, the defense is good enough structurally to force 1 or 2 turnovers and essentially just strangle you. Now, on the other side of the ball, what makes this fun, and also if you're looking at a 10:30 kickoff time right now on the East Coast and thinking like, I don't know if I want to stay up for this. I think this game's going to be determined in the first quarter because if UNLV does benefit from any kind of turnover luck, forced turnover, whatever you want to call it, their ability in the go-go offense under Brennan Marion is to score quickly and in a cluster, right? They want to get you out of position. It's a lot of the sort of fundamental conceits of any tempo offense, but they have talent at skill positions, and they're really creative schematically with what they do with their receivers. Marion came over. He was the wide receivers coach at Texas. I really like what they do. It's very fun to watch, but it is cheap fireworks sometimes in that it can go off and be amazing. But if they don't keep their pace, it becomes very hard to respond to a more physical ground and pound team like Boise.
So you're thinking this might not be a game because Boise might grind them down. That's what you're like. If it might be a Boise 35-10 complete handling.
I think barring some sort of strange injury or some sort of unforeseen turn of events, I think we'll know in the first quarter if UNLV is scoring quickly. Now here, let me flip it on its head real fast because I'm not a prognosticator, and I love to ask questions and learn.
For people who watch the game, right? Syracuse UNLV is a game in the 40s that was like you couldn't take your eyes off that game. So we know what that UNLV looks like.
And that was like a low key top. I think when we get done with the season, we'll like, what were the top 50 games to watch? Like no one's going to remember Syracuse UNLV, and it was a fantastic viewing experience. Awesome. Absolutely. Syracuse also weirdly has just played a lot of fun games this year. I think they've been relegated to some night shifts. I really like what's happening there because what Fran's doing is
get ready for Thursday night, brother. Syracuse and Pitt.
It's a good game.
They're the second and 12th passing offenses in the country. They're going to be chucking it all over the place. Talk about a game in the 40s.
You're welcome,
Pittsburgh.
Pittsburgh.
Is going to be awesome.
You're welcome. Let's go. Son of the South, Cade Bell. Hey,
we'll take him.
I don't know who to give. Here's the thing. I don't know who to give credit to at Pittsburgh. Is it Cade Bell, the dynamic offensive coordinator who came from? He's originally from Gainesville, but he was at Valdosta State for years. By the way, son of Kerwin Bell. I don't know if that rings a bell for people, but
it's ringing.
What's funny to me is
absolutely.
Is it
ring my bell? Hey, ring my bell. Cade Bell. Ring my bell.
He rings my bell. I didn't mean to do that.
Kerwin Bell.
Is it more a credit to a new dynamic OC coming in? Because like Whipple did this at Pitt, right? Or is it credit to Narduzzi just finally dialing the curmudgeon down like 2 notches and saying, I'm gonna let the OC do his job for once?
It's Danny.
I guess it's both, right?
Man, it's the old guy. He's too old for this stuff, and he added the new young guy, and he's letting him do his thing. They're going on 4th down at midfield. They're playing nuts. Pitt.
If you haven't watched Pitt, yeah. If you and like when I do like split zone or I do like national stuff like KOTN, I assume your audience has probably had more exposure to Pitt than others, right? Pitt is one of those when I go like if I'm doing like Sirius XM, okay,
yeah.
If I'm doing like Sirius XM and people are just talking, they're always like, look, we can all talk about Alabama, Ohio State, right? But if they're like, hey, who should you be watching this year? That's just an interesting. I'm like, hey. I can't believe I'm recommending this as a good time, but check out Pitt's offense is a statement that I've said this year. That's the stuff I love.
And Kyle McCord is basically Northern Cam Ward. Like Kyle McCord is out there making big time throws all over the place, making some crazy throws. Like again,
can I write that one down? Kyle McCord.
Write it down.
Northern Cam Ward.
And guess what? One of them's in the Heisman race and one isn't. But both of them are like boomer bust or awesome. And then you're like, what are you doing? I'm just saying. And
I do really like what he's done. I like his second act at Syracuse a lot. I think they've handled it really well.
Narduzzi was talking about how like watch this guy. He's like an NFL quarterback. He's going to be one of the best quarterbacks that's come in and played at Pitt in years. So like again, Landis and I are going to break it down a little bit here. We cannot hype Pitt-Syracuse enough. Let's get back to this game.
All right. UNLV,
Boise State. So here's the thing. Because we're looking at it more from a Boise perspective. If Boise grinds them down, Genty has run for more than 200 yards in 3 games so far this year. Yes. If they grind him down and he is Genty and he drops another 200, that might not be an exciting game, but it is colossal, I think, for college football.
It's a statement.
It confirms everything. And it started with Oregon. They should have beaten Oregon. But Genty's that good. Yeah. This is your playoff team. And then we are on to, can Boise beat Georgia?
12-5.
Now, I like to say, can Boise beat Georgia? Because that's what I want to happen in my heart. Yeah. But you can say, can Boise beat Ohio State? Can Boise beat Oregon? Can Boise beat Texas? Because the 5 seed's going to be the title game loser in either the SEC or the Big Ten. And that's the conversation. So let's have that conversation specifically in a world where Boise played right with Oregon all game. And if Oregon didn't get 2 special teams touchdowns, Boise would have won. Mm-hmm. Do you think that can happen in December? Can Boise do that?
All right, 5. So do you want me to just do Georgia, or do you want me to do the series of 5 seeds that are likeliest? You want to start with Georgia?
We can do everything. Because listen, how good of a headline is can Boise State beat Georgia? Come on, we're living in the SEO world. Ooh, I got to watch that show. But we can do everybody.
Yeah, that Chiron below me is something right now. No, they can't.
I'll just wear this. You can talk about all the teams, and I'll wear this.
They can't.
What? Wait,
no,
they can't. They can't beat Georgia because Georgia's got a bunch of big guys. Come on.
I think it's not so much. I think it's not so much big guys right now. I think it's the. I can't recall ever saying this, but after the Alabama game, I've never been so impressed with a loser coming out of a major top 5 game in season. I think that it was because of Georgia loses the game on this sort of bizarre, monumental Ryan Williams play that, like, I think I wrote in the post, it was the Instagram era play, right? But if you just take that game on its merits,
does that mean terrible defense where two guys cracked their heads together like coconuts and the 17-year-old went up and caught the ball?
Well, and he also sidesteps it, and I mean, he runs a really good route too. You got to pick your who are you going to insult more? You got to keep your balance.
We hate Georgia more than Bama. We root against Georgia before we root against Bama. But it's close.
Georgia was presented with 2 things they hadn't seen yet from a very, very talented playoff caliber team. Okay, so that was the outside zone running that they had on Alabama's offense, and then also I think they were dropping and confusing in the pass game in a way that had not been presented to Georgia yet either. Both were adjusted for.
I don't mean to cut you off. I don't want to go too much about how good Georgia is. No offense. Is this?
I wonder why. No, here's why.
Okay.
Unfortunately, I was in your boat until last weekend. I very much. By the way,
just the shover.
Let me win you back. I am still convinced. And I do a show down south on 440 Sports that is more SEC centric. And I have taken, every time they post a clip of me talking about Georgia, I don't know if there's like one message board that's doing this. There is a very litany of Georgia fans attacking me because I said Georgia's offense is overly reductive, in my opinion. They have been reliant.
I don't think Carson Beck's great. Yeah.
Have any of their quarterbacks been great? I've already done the Stetson Bennett Kia story with you, right? Like, I've already told you the story about why we call him Stetson Bennett Kia.
Yeah.
This, I think, inevitably will haunt Georgia. I just don't think a team, as much as I love what they're doing, like Boise, has the ability to do that. I don't like the matchup fundamentally with the front 7 on what they do with Janty. Yes. Can Boise beat a 5 seed? Yes. Can Boise beat that 5 seed? No. Is Georgia going to be a 5 seed? No.
You think Georgia's going to win the SEC?
Yes.
Okay. I still don't think that. I think they got a bunch of short fields against Texas.
Who's going to win? Do you think it's Texas?
We can get Texas back around.
Quarterback management issues are starting to be bad.
Oh, no. It's like one of those things. Like, we were talking about on the show. You're running to Fansville. Ha ha. Everyone loves my backup. And it's like, oh, God, stop running that commercial. It's happening in real life. So, like, we get it.
Yes.
Too many good quarterbacks is actually a thing. But Boise, right? So now we can expand this. Boise versus a 5, a 12 versus a 5.
Yes.
I do think in the first, 4, 6, 7 years of the playoff, I do think a 12 will beat a 5.
I'm making a list for you. All right. I'm making a list for you.
It has to be the right 12. It has to be the right 12.
I know. That's what I'm doing.
You've got to have an amazing individual player. I do think that, which is Genty absolutely fits that. And then there's got to be something about the 5 that there's a little bit of something missing there, right? Like a perfect 5 that should have been the 1. Okay, but if you get a team like that, because we have had some
homework on the fly here. Hang on.
So let me throw 3 matchups at you that would have been. So the thing is, Cincinnati throw this off a little bit because they made the playoff in 21, and they were also were better than a 12 seed in 20. So I'm looking at 23, 22, 19. Okay. These probably would have been those 3 years. These would have been the 12-5 matchups. You're looking at number 12 Liberty in 23 against number 5 Bama. I don't love that for Liberty. 2022, you're looking at number 12 Tulane versus number 5 Ohio State. That's the Tulane team that beat USC in a bowl.
Yeah, I like that one.
2019, number 12 Memphis versus number 5 Georgia. Is that still Norvell, right? I don't know. So I like Boise better than any of this. I like Boise against the 5 this year, but so specifically Boise against any 5, not just Georgia, but the idea of a 12 versus a 5. Are you feeling good about a 12 winning one of those games in the first 6 years of the 12-team playoff, or do you think it is almost impossible?
No, this is where you're getting into my wheelhouse, honestly, because I think I've written 2 columns already about this year, about how this is. Look, there are a lot of things coming around the corner for college football that are going to crush the group of 5, and I hate to say that as I'm repping for it and all that, but for now, the 12-5 matchup has never been. This is the best thing to happen to the group of 5 since Boise beat Oklahoma on the Statue of Liberty. Okay. I made a list. While I was listening to you, I was multitasking. I promise.
Nice.
I think Boise could upset Tennessee. I know Boise could beat Missouri. I think Missouri might be the most fraudulent in this space. I think Boise could upset Ole Miss. I think Boise could upset Indiana. I think Boise could actually upset K-State. As I go through here,
how about Penn State?
So I stopped at Penn State with a question, and then I didn't go any higher in the SEC either. But now I'm doing this off the rip, so to speak. So what's interesting to me is they wouldn't catch him as a 5, but let's say they pull off an upset. What I like about Boise is, what if you get to the next level and it's BYU? What if you get to the next level and it's Clemson? Then we're talking about a run.
You beat the 4. Now
we're talking about a run.
Semifinals. So I do think, everybody agrees, in the 4-team playoff era, it was a big deal the first year for number 4 Ohio State to beat number 1 Alabama. It said, this is why we're doing this. It's not just. I do think a 12. Yeah. I think a lot of people will be dismissive of the 12 initially here. Now, I think Boise is the perfect 12 for year 1, whether they beat the 5 or not. Like the fact that they get this much attention and their guy might win the Heisman. But that will be a seismic change for the sport if and when it happens, when the 12 wins that game. And I do think it'll be good for the G5, but will it be too late? Are they already on their death march and it won't matter? Or could that stop it? And then you create a world where, hey, being in the G5 is not so bad. We can aim for this. We can compete. It's like our own little version of a national title. Why do I want to go be at the bottom of a power conference when I can be the best of a G5 conference and get a playoff spot? How transformative would a 12 win be? Or is the writing already on the wall for what this sport's going to turn into?
There was a lot of questions. I would also add, there's 2 I left out. I think they could beat Illinois, and I think they could beat SMU as well. We're talking about 1-loss teams right now in contending spots. So I just gave them either the benefit of the doubt or an endorsement on 8 or 9 teams. That's my confidence level. But here's the problem. It's specific to Boise. The G5 right now is suffering from a lot of off-field things, and I think that's what's so scary is that, one, we just culled a pretty significant amount of financially similar teams to what we used to call the Power 5. So Cincinnati, Houston, UCF, et cetera, they all move into the Big 12, right? So we've shaved off. I think we're increasing the gulf. Okay, we're increasing the gulf between haves and have-nots across the sport. The problem is this is 2-tiered now because the Power 2 are pulling away from the other 2. But I think when you're in that other 2 range now, we're seeing a decline. You've got Boise and a handful of other programs financially in terms of can compete in the portal, which basically means NIL now, right? High school recruiting, exposure, television contract, etc. The fall off, the drop off, as also someone who kind of makes a living watching and predicting the coaching markets, it's dramatic. It's really bad. You and I have shared a sort of sympathetic kind of refrain on the MAC, but the MAC is not alone. There is a weird independently funded situation at Liberty. Otherwise, the CUSA is in the same dire straits. The just sort of existing mess that is the Mountain West / maybe Pac-2 whatever / Pac-8. That's deck chairs, right? That's all basically just a reshuffling. These jobs are not being considered the same way they used to. So ECU and Southern Miss just came open, and ECU fans are clamoring for Joe Sloan, the play caller at LSU. Why in the world would you do that?
It's a pay cut, right?
Not only is it a pay cut, though, but just think about the potential dead end, because you just pitched me this beautiful scenario. If you're Boise of, hey, we can acquit ourselves. We can play here. We can be in this space. How many other programs, I'll ask you, do you think can assemble a roster that not only earns the 12 slot, but Liberty's a joke. Liberty, statistically, advanced stats, or just take basic stats. Just take basic stats. What happened with Liberty last year going into the Fiesta with Oregon is a disservice to the entire concept of the group of 5. It just fell that way. It sucks. It fell that way. We don't want Liberties. We want Boises, right?
Yes.
How many Boises can we create?
And that's the thing. That's what I think Washington and Oregon State, and we talked about this before, should try to be Boise's, but instead they're trying to it depends what's the Pac-12 going to be? Is the Pac-12 going to be the best group of 5 or the worst power conference? I'm curious about how that shakes down and all that. But because I do think part of your point, and there's one more question I want to get to. I do think a terrible 12 losing by 70 in the first round would do
bad,
maybe more harm than a win would do good.
Because without a doubt,
that's it. They're out.
Sankey and no, they're done. Sankey and Petiti the next year at the playoff meeting, they're going to say, you know what? Not only do we want our 4 auto bids, why are we burning off a bad game for inventory purposes? Talking about television sales now. Yeah, I think it would be disastrous if Liberty made it. If last year the 12-team format had debuted and Liberty ended up in a 5-12 with Oregon, and that resulted, I didn't even watch that game.
No,
that was horrific. That didn't even look physically like 2 football teams playing each other. So we want to avoid that. It's not a counter necessarily, because I know they've already played each other and the result was the result. What if it was Mateer at quarterback and Wazoo were having this conversation about as a really unpredictable, like you want to get into a tense playoff situation against a 5 that's almost certainly coming off of a conference championship loss. There are a lot of things I would want to see in this world. If I'm coming off of a loss in Indianapolis or a loss in Atlanta, because that's probably your 5 seed, right? Probably.
Absolutely.
Do you want to deal with Washington State? Like that has a feeling about it. And also Wazoo, dude, that entire program is so comfortable in the kamikaze position of being like, oh, you want us to go? Where are we going? We're going to Tuscaloosa?
Absolutely.
Great. Don't care. We're going to Happy Valley? Don't care. They are as close of a program as I can think this year that would fit that bill. But long term, there's maybe 5 or 6. I think they could even muster this talent. I think one to keep an eye on for the future is San Diego State.
Yep.
Because of the way that California talent is being rerouted out with the Big Ten issue. Otherwise, like, I can't make a big list for you. And I think that's depressing. To me, it's depressing.
But you only need one every year. You need one. Right.
All right. What about the service? Where do y'all annex the service academies?
Heck yes.
Okay.
Look at a map. Right. New York and Maryland, we're taking them.
Okay. I love service academy football. I love everything about the history. I did a very notable story in my career. I spent 8 days at Army right before they broke the streak against Navy. I love those programs to death. I think they are not going to be able to do what we need in our little exercise today in the application. I would worry significantly about them in that situation.
No, because their whole thing is you get because I've seen, Navy almost beat Ohio State one year. You get those games where you only have 6 days to prepare for the way they play. But in a playoff, especially that first round game, you're going to have a couple weeks to prepare.
Army did it with Michigan.
It's not going to be a good team. So
Army almost beat Michigan. Army almost beat Oklahoma. But as you're saying, I don't know if I don't see it. I don't see it, unfortunately.
So
5 teams, maybe.
I hope we get one every year. I hope I will be rooting. These one legit.
Well, who's in your world that could do this? That's in your space.
I mean,
are we discussing anyone from the MAC?
Not like show me Ben Roethlisberger. Show me Ben Roethlisberger. Like show me that again. But the whole point is,
are you?
Is that ever going to happen again? Because I don't know. But like.
What about Toledo?
There are guys like that, but like, can they keep guys? Right. So that's the whole thing too. Is like that's the big question of all this. Diego Pavia would have been a great G5 quarterback to throw up against a 5 seed, except he's in the SEC now. So are you like Mateer? Right. I call him Baker Mateer. Like you're gonna like that.
Yeah.
But is he gonna stay there, or is he gonna be the quarterback for? I don't know.
Cam Ward. He's gonna do Cam Ward. What Cam Ward did.
Yeah.
All right. So you have 3. I have 3 in your range. Is that it?
Washington State, Boise
Oregon State,
and Oregon State. Like, and so again, but I just don't think the MAC is positioned right now to do that. And as you said, the service academies aren't really either. So
what about
who else is there even in the South?
Or what in the South? There's a way for Sunbelt programs to do this. Louisiana, actually under Napier, would fit this bill pretty strongly.
Okay.
The Sunbelt has I wouldn't say a better chance, but the puncher's chance here. They have a series of well-funded programs who are starting to actually establish NIL budgets and sort of work in that transfer space of, hey, you're originally from this part of the country. You went to Indiana, it didn't work out. You went to South Carolina, it didn't work. Come home to Mobile, Alabama, and play at USA. That's what I would like to see the MAC do. But right now, there's a better financial blueprint at the top half of the Sun Belt than there is at any level, I feel like, outside of maybe Toledo or Northern Illinois in the MAC. That's why I keep going back to me being worried about the MAC.
And that's the thing. I don't know that we've seen the MAC benefit from the portal in that way. Hey, it didn't work out at a power conference program, come home. But
Curtis Rourke.
DeQuan Finns at Baylor and Curtis Rourke is at Indiana.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah,
So they're losing in the portal. They're not gaining.
I love everything that's happening right now. Let me see if I can find this to me. You like this?
Look at that.
You like that? You got one too? I'll get him to send you
my own. I got my own cigarettes. I just get my own.
Love it. All right. So love. Here's the reality.
Typical. They send it to a Nashville guy. We did a whole show on Indiana. I don't get squat.
I do a lot of shows on Indiana. By the way, the company that made this T-shirt, that's Indiana. I'm glad they didn't send me cigarettes. It might have triggered my older habits. Look, let's be honest about Indiana. That's JMU's defense and Ohio's passing battery. Okay,
yeah,
and that only exists. That exists in 2024.
When you smush 2.5 teams together and you make a super team. So
nothing wrong with that.
But credit to them, they did. I mean, this is how you do it. So anyway, I would encourage people to watch UNLV Boise State on Friday night. You might get a great game, or you might get Boise confirmation. And either way, it matters to college football this year. A UNLV win would actually be a little bit goofy because it's like UNLV is interesting to follow, but UNLV in the 12 seed is not the same as Ashton Genty in the 12 seed. So it's like, for the good of the sport, you kind of want Boise to win this thing, right? You want to see Boise in the playoff.
I would throw this out for your audience. I think that if you saw a convincing UNLV win here, it would be offensive driven. I think we would agree on that.
Yep.
And you might see young Brennan Marion in a KOTN region head coaching job sooner than later. The offensive coordinator.
We'll be on alert for that. You can come to Purdue. All right, Stephen Godfrey, tell us a little bit about who killed college football. You're out there. You are killing college football. You're not the suspect,
I did.
Right?
I killed it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you were there. You've been on the show. Show.
How's it going? What do people need to keep up on with this?
WKCFB.com. You can find us on Substack as well to support independent journalism. Do you remember that? Do you remember independent journalism?
I'm independent journalizing right now, brother. That's why they don't send me anything.
Exactly. No kidding, right? So we just debuted episode 3, which is Suspect Number 3, the NCAA. To catch you up, if you're not familiar, we've had Suspect Number 1, television. Suspect Number 2, conferences. Suspect Number 3, the NCAA. And if you're thinking, wow, these are very predictable, wait for the back end. And if you've never heard of the show before, what we did was, you think about all the seismic changes that are happening in the sport, everything that's gone on. We were trying to figure out a way to tell that story in real time as these changes are still occurring, and try to add the historical context and reporting to it. We needed an idea. We needed a sort of a structural conceit. Of course, murder podcasts are through the roof. So we sort of jokingly started saying this. And then your best friend, Nick Saban, gave us manna from heaven, because he very ridiculously and pretentiously went to DC a month after he resigned, and he said to a bunch of idiot senators and Congress people, the game I know doesn't exist anymore. Yeah. And I said, then it's dead. Who killed it? And I took him at his word. Yeah. That was it.
I like to think of it like Clue. I'm going to do this. I'm going to try to guess it. Kirby Smart on the sideline with a shove. Is that the murderer? Did I get it right? Can we look in the little envelope? Oh, did we get it right? He's a murderer. Okay. He's not.
Can I ask you a question?
You can.
Because you were around Urban for so long.
Yes.
Why is it just the sort of statesman's politician's dynamic of Urban? Because Urban ran dirty programs, right? And I don't want to sound like Jim Harbaugh.
Why he's not a shover?
No. I know he's not that's a disposition and sort of a mentality.
He's an internal shover. He is shoved.
Yes, exactly. How does that relate to someone like Kirby? Is it just more the you key in on Kirby, and you've been around coaches before that operated levels of corruption? What makes Kirby different than like a Meyer or even a Saban, the guy he learned from?
Yeah, I would say the danger to society. is the thing for me. That's the greatest thing. The driving that has already had tragic consequences that I feel like they have not gotten under control, and that is his program, and he bears some culpability for the dangers that they pose to society at large with the way his players behave out in the open. So that's where it all starts with me, and that Georgia doesn't really seem to do much about it. So like that's just a real world conversation. And we also understand that certainly Urban Meyer at Florida had players who were out potentially doing things that would maybe endanger society, but like that wasn't
Urban Meyer had a murderer play for him.
Yeah. So and like there's been a lot about that, right? Like that sticks to Urban Meyer. Does it stick to Kirby? That's all. So that's the main thing. That's where.
Do you think it's because we're sort of in media res in this story? Do you think it's because it's the real time effect of it, and there hasn't been any hindsight or sort of contextualizing that's happened yet?
I don't know. I'm not sure how much Kirby's going to get contextualized. I don't know. I'm not sure why he does not seem to get the flack that like the stuff about Urban Meyer and the number of arrests at Florida, that was a regular part of the coverage while it was happening there.
Okay.
Right? And I feel it is less so at Georgia. Certainly it's been talked about, but I think it's less so. I do think it's less so. So that's all. That's where it starts. I mean, for real, it's the real world stuff. Yeah. And then I think that the idea that he shoved a player and the AD at Georgia is the most outraged person on earth because there were some beer cans thrown on the field and he zipped his lip when this guy shoved a player. So it is what it is, brother.
Do you have any historical context for this kind of like what you believe is like a total sort of lockstep fealty from the administration down to the media towards an in progress dynasty? Is there anything that you can recall that's quite like this? Because these sort of, these omertas, this is how like the Penn State scandal was built, right? Is that what you're intoning?
I thought you were going to mean like when the Ohio State president said he just hopes that Jim Tressel doesn't fire him.
Fire me, so, like, shout out to Gordon.
I'm not saying it's the first time, but
no, I'm not punching back. I'm genuinely interested in like where you like how you're shaping this.
Where's the cover story?
Because I don't disagree with you.
Where's the outrage? It's not that it hasn't happened before, but I feel like people, the media mostly, is letting Georgia get away with it in a way that previous iterations of this did not get away with it. They were much more criticized publicly, I think.
I'll double down, and the media can't. The media is feckless now. They don't possess the ability, the resources, or even the. There's something that's lost. It's not a generational thing. I'm not going to complain about kids these days because there are actually some really dynamic young reporters. Dude, that kid that got banned from USC's practice report, I keep calling him a kid, but like Luca Evans, like he has come right back on that beat. Lincoln is a pill to deal with. By the way, if you're just talking about fit in a media sense, that's the worst fit going in the NFL or college football. That's a good one. Worst fit. Coddled, entitled Okie decided that I'm going to go to the second largest media market in North America, and it rankles me when I'm questioned publicly.
Yeah.
You know what I want more than anything else, and it's not going to happen, obviously. But my dream is that Lincoln Riley is the head coach of the New York Jets next year, because I have never seen someone more paper thin at that high of a position than Lincoln Riley.
I'm going to let you go on that one because I don't think you're going to top entitled, coddled Okie today. You said a lot of great stuff.
Okie, you're not allowed to. I can say Okie.
But I would never culturally appropriate. That's not what I do, Stephen. He's Stephen Godfrey. You can listen to his awesome narrative podcast, Who Killed College Football? Might be Kirby on the sideline with the shove. It might be somebody else. You said there's surprises coming.
I got to start doing it like that. I got to start yelling the Who like that.
Yeah. So we would encourage you to partake of that. And we love having Stephen stop by and join us here on KOTN. Thanks as always, man.
Yes, sir.
Bill Landis up next. Pitt versus Syracuse breakdown on Kings of the North. Got to put Put on my cigarette. He's Bill Landis. He's here. He's been waiting for 12 minutes and saying to himself, why do I bother to come on time when Doug won't shut up? So
I'm happy. I'm happy I got to stick around for, what was it, coddled entitled Okie? That was great. That was great. That might be that's going to be a tough turn of phrase to beat here on KOTN.
It does reassure me when we have an episode where the most outrageous thing said was not by me. So that is good. Let's get into a couple awesome games that really matter for their conference races. We'll do a bunch of other big game breakdowns on our Thursday show where we do picks and previews. We're going to do a Boise-UNLV more on-field breakdown on Thursday. We're going to do Oregon-Illinois. We're going to do Navy-Notre Dame, which is a top 25 matchup and is super interesting. But we want to do these two today, Landis. We'll do Cincinnati-Colorado second, and we'll start off with Pitt-Syracuse. Because Pitt-Syracuse is Thursday night at 7:30, in Pittsburgh. You and I are going to be there. We want to give people time to consume this and get ready and get excited for this because it's an absolute banger. And it also matters for the ACC standings, conference standings as we speak right now. Clemson's 5-0, Miami's 3-0, SMU's 3-0, Pitt's 3-0, Syracuse, Duke, and Virginia Tech are all 2-1. So that's 7 teams with 0 or 1 conference loss. Clemson kind of has a weird thing because their last 2 games are non-conference. So they've got to get all their conference games out of the way. Whereas like you see these other teams have only played 3 conference games. But I absolutely think that like the winner of this game is absolutely in it, Landis, right in the thick of it. Like this is, and the loser's in a really tough spot because I don't know if it's impossible that a 2-loss conference team would make the ACC title game, but I think maybe not. And you're probably in a weird tiebreaker. So if Syracuse loses, like they might be out, and then Pitt all of a sudden, okay, now you've lost all your wiggle room. So like this really matters for the ACC.
It I think the thing that complicates your hypothetical of a 2-loss team is that there aren't. Take the subset of teams that are currently in the race, like they don't play each other a ton.
There's not a ton of them.
So I don't know that there are many opportunities for these teams to take 2 losses, especially the ones that don't yet have any, right? So this is a monumental game for the race. And can I just say before we break down the game, if Pitt wins this game and if SMU beats Duke this week, I think you need to go down to Dallas with your swords.
Oh.
Next week when Pitt plays at SMU.
Oh. Ooh. I'd take swords to Dallas. I could stay with Ari.
You would literally be bringing a knife to a gunfight. You maybe still do it.
Doug got shot at the SMU game. He thought it would be hilarious to bring his sword out at a tailgate and 73 guys in the parking lot dropped on him. They were holstered and certified, and that was that. ACC big games left. To your point, they aren't constantly playing each other. We have the Syracuse Pitt game on Thursday night. Pitt at SMU next week, you mentioned. Louisville already has 2 conference losses, but just feels like a competitive team, right? That could still muck this up a little bit. So I put Louisville at Clemson on November 2nd on this list. And then 2 big ones for our 2 northern teams in the race here late. Clemson at Pitt on November 16th, and then Miami at Syracuse to end the regular season on November 30th. It would be awesome if those 2 games in the last 3 weeks of the season are still mattering for this, because Pitt and Syracuse are still in it with Clemson and Miami. I would really look forward to those.
If Syracuse Miami is a thing, like this will be some tough decisions for the final week of the season. Like
too much good ball in the North.
I'm planning to go to the Ohio State Michigan game that day, but should I have an eye on the dome on that day, and maybe you have to go up to Syracuse instead?
Godfrey, I just called Kyle McCord the Cam Ward of the North.
Yeah,
and we're getting Cam Ward, Kyle McCord. They might need to throw for 400 in that game.
One of them is going to throw the ball through the roof of the dome. I can guarantee you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's some great stuff ahead, including this game on Thursday night that you and I will be at. And I wish I had more information, and I don't. It's just, there's too much going on. If you're going to the game, find us in the parking lot. I don't like maybe we'll have a box of donuts or Little Caesars or something. We do not have a great tailgate plan, and I apologize. So I would say this: follow the KOTN CFB Twitter account, and we will provide as much information there on Thursday night as we can about where we are, what time. Here, come find us. Can we drop a pin on Twitter? I don't know. We'd love to see some Northern folks who watch the show and are going to Syracuse at Pitt. We just don't have a great plan for who's bringing the casserole and who's bringing the brownies. Sorry.
Yeah. I've heard I don't have time to make a buffalo chicken dip. I would love to, but not enough hours in the day.
Yeah. That guy works so hard, he can't even make a buffalo chicken dip. That's how hard he works. He barely has time to get a pumpkin loaf and a hot cider on a Saturday morning. This guy is all ball in the fall. Larry Fitzgerald night. He was elected to the College Football Hall of Fame. He will be inducted in December. They're doing a bobblehead. How good is that? They're doing a Larry Fitzgerald bobblehead. I kind of really want one too. So
we're looking nice on that shelf behind you. Just like a Larry Fitzgerald up there. Yeah.
So they'll be doing that. And a couple other things here. Pitt leads the series 43-33-3. Pitt is the team that Syracuse has played the most in its history. This is the 80th game between these teams. For Pitt, it's the third most. Syracuse is the third most behind Backyard Brawl, West Virginia, and Penn State. So this is a historic game. Northern, the ACC now, a lot of good stuff there. And can I get people this excited about this game, Landis, before we get specific?
Please.
Last year, Pitt and Syracuse combined for 387 passing yards per game. This year, they combined for 671 passing yards per game.
Yeah.
Syracuse throws for 365. That's second in the country. Pitt throws for 306. That's 12th in the country. Let's go. How fun is this going to be?
It's going to be awesome. Yeah. I think both teams are going to deliver. Right. They're rested.
Let's do it.
They've been eyeing the game. I think they're going to deliver. It's going to be a banger.
And their defenses might not be that great.
Which is an important part of the equation if you'd like to see both teams throw the ball around. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So let's start with which side of the ball are we starting on with?
Syracuse offense against the Pitt defense.
Who's that? Is that you or me?
That is me. That's
professional.
Here
we go.
And I will I think we can just like scrap the conversation about Syracuse running the ball against Pitt because Syracuse stinks at running the ball. It's kind of weird because LaQuint Allen's a very good running back, but they just do not run the ball well. They are 120th in rushing offense, and Pitt, meanwhile, is 24th in rushing defense and has actually seen some pretty good running backs. So I'm just going to assume that Pitt's going to have that handled. And this game is going to come down to Kyle McCord throwing the ball against Pitt's defense.
So we're going to do Cincinnati, Colorado breakdown next. And I also am scrapping the Colorado running the ball conversation. So this is why are we pretending here? I will say that they both throw the ball to their running backs. Among power 4 running backs, LaQuint Allen is first in receptions for Syracuse and Des Reed is tied for third for Pitt. So these have two really good running backs that get thrown the ball. Just interesting.
Yeah, and I think there are some compelling matchups here with the Syracuse offense against the Pitt defense. We know that Syracuse has good receivers with Trevor Pena and Jackson Meeks. Zeed Haynes, who was I think thought to be the number 1 receiver coming into the year, just hasn't played since week 2. He's dealing with a family issue that Fran Brown says when they get him back, they're going to celebrate it. They're going to let off blue and orange balloons when that happens, but they're not expecting him back. I don't know anytime soon. So it's Trevor Pena, Jackson Meeks. And I actually think it probably comes more down to what can Pitt do to cover Rondé Gadsden, the Syracuse tight end, and then LaQuint Allen out of the backfield. And it's not because it's not the Pitt's not trotting out like tremendous corners. Those two guys I think are just mismatches because you can get them on linebackers, you can get them on safeties. And Rondé Gadsden is 6'5", 236 pounds, and there aren't a lot of second-level defensive players running around who have that kind of frame. And I do think Trevor Pena's had a great season. It does feel to me like Syracuse's offense is becoming a little more oriented around Oronde Gadsden. He had a very weird 2-game stretch in the middle of the season against Holy Cross and Stanford where he had like 3 catches in those 2 games combined. In the last 2 games, 19 targets, 16 receptions, 216 yards. He hasn't scored a touchdown since week 2, but Kyle McCord is peppering Oronde Gadsden with targets over the middle of the field. And I'm not saying Pitt can't handle it because I don't. Kyle Lewis is a really good linebacker who we've talked about. He was on our All-North team, and I think he is a guy that Pitt trusts in coverage, even on tight ends like Oronde Gadsden. So I think you might see some pretty fun matchups there. But Kyle Lewis is 6 feet, 225 pounds. Gadsden's got 5 inches and more than 10 pounds on him. Like I just don't. That maybe is where the game could perhaps be won for Syracuse. Is just like Pitt's like we don't have anything to contend with that guy. So that's like the kind of the matchup that I've circled here is what does Pitt try to do against Oronde Gadsden?
2 absolutely incredible, as good as anybody in the country playmakers in this game. In Oronde Gadsden for Syracuse and Des Reed for Pitt. Like this is this game should just not be taking a back seat to stuff, right? We get it. It's not going to get the hype of Georgia, Texas, but there are really good players in this game. Can I give you one more little tidbit that I thought was interesting?
Please do.
This whole thing for Pitt is that they hired Cade Bell, the young offensive coordinator from Western Carolina, and he brought Poppy Williams and Des Reed and some guys that really mattered. It's not quite like the JMU to Indiana thing, but it's part of that. And Fran Brown, the Syracuse coach, went to Western Carolina.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And he was recruited there by Matt Rule. That's how Matt Rule, and that was like Fran Brown played at Western Carolina. Matt Rule was a young coach. He recruited him from Jersey to come down and play there. And then he wound up working for Matt Rule at Temple and like all, like this is, and now here we are. So there's just some like, what a night for Western Carolina. I hope they should have a campus shot of everybody in the student union sitting around watching Pitt-Syracuse in Western Carolina. And we know it's been a rough ride in Western Carolina, right? Like, so this is like for real, shout out to Western Carolina. We hope everybody down there is doing okay, but like, this is like a super awesome game. So a little comparison here, right? Between the Syracuse offense and the Pitt offense. Turnover worthy plays this year for Eli Holstein and Kyle McCord. Eli Holstein has 12 and Kyle McCord has 11. And that's a lot for both of them.
It is a lot. Yeah.
Big time throws, which again is this PFF metric. It's like, you know, a big time throw when you see it. Kyle McCord has 21. Eli Holstein has 8. So like they're both kind of high flying passing offenses statistically. Kyle McCord is better at this so far than Eli Holstein. Maybe because Eli Holstein is a second-year college player who just transferred from Alabama and never played before. And Kyle McCord started all last year for Ohio State. But I as much as we've talked about both players here, McCord and Holstein, I don't think anybody should go into this game thinking the quarterback matchup is even.
I don't think it's even. Eli Holstein gives you more as a playmaker runner than Kyle McCord does. Although Kyle McCord now with 2 healthy ankles, like has had some big time scrambles when Syracuse has needed it. It's interesting to look at Kyle McCord, just like on some of the stats compared to last year. Like this year, he's number 14 in the country in EPA per drop back. He was 8th last year at Ohio State, so it's a little worse. He's 35th in the country this year in passing efficiency. He was 13th last year. And I think there's the trade-off there of like he's gonna turn the ball over a little bit and he's gonna have some turnover-worthy plays, but he's also leaning into the gunslinger I think he was meant to be, right? Like and just wasn't. I don't think Ryan Day wants his quarterbacks playing that way, right? There's too much going on with Ohio State's offense that you don't really need to do that. Syracuse absolutely needs Kyle McCord to do it.
Yes.
Which is why Kyle McCord is also 4th in the country in pass attempts, and the 3 guys ahead of him, who I think the number 1 guy has 12 more attempts than Kyle McCord does, and they've all played 1 more game than Kyle McCord has.
Yeah,
so he'll take that mantle back this week. He has become, I think, an incredibly entertaining player to watch.
100%.
And part of that is his volatility, but there's also a ton of high level quarterback play in there, which Pat Narduzzi noted this week, the Pitt head coach. We have a clip Mike can play of what Pat Narduzzi said about Kyle McCord.
player. If you're not a Pitt fan, if you're not a Syracuse fan, but you're a quarterback fan, you should get your tickets now because that guy's going to play in the National Football League. We watched him on third down the other day. I don't know if he throws an incomplete pass, especially on third and medium. He throws darts. He's accurate. He's smart. He knows where to go with the ball. He will be the best quarterback that's walked in to play us in this stadium in a while. So we got a great chore ahead for us to defend him and a slew of really good receivers. Like it's a whole new deal up there. And I'm happy for Fran. He's done a tremendous job. And it's going to be a big battle between a 6-0 and a 5-1 football team Thursday night.
I would like to note that Drake May played at Pitt last year. So
suck it, Carolina.
I don't know if Pat Narduzzi forgot that or if he actually just thinks Kyle McCord is better than Drake May.
Yeah,
clearly a very high opinion of him.
My favorite part of that clip was when he said third down.
Yeah, third down.
So good. God, love Pitt. Okay. So this is like a thing. Like they're going to be out there chucking it around. Let me ask you this question.
Mm-hmm.
Pitt's last game. So they're both these teams are coming off an off week, which is like you get an off week and then you play on Thursday. So like no one's going to be worn down. Like this is a really nice setup for this. Pitt barely beat Cal. They beat Cal 17-15 in the last game. I think that probably was Pitt's worst offensive game and best defensive game of the year. Is that fair to say?
I think so. Yeah.
So that's what Pitt's coming into on this. And they were not good. They averaged 4.8 as we flip to Pitt offense versus Syracuse defense. They averaged 4.8 yards per attempt against Cal. Eli Holstein was over 8 yards per attempt in every other game before that. Eli Holstein had 7 turnover-worthy plays in the first 2 games of the year. Then he only had 2 turnover-worthy plays in the next 3 games. And then he had 3 versus Cal, and he was throwing it to him, dude. Like he said he played like a freshman after that game. He was off. So that, like, if you watch that Pitt game, and we talked about it the week after on the show, that they scored on the first play of the second quarter on a 4th and 1 call where Cade Bell drew it up on the sideline and went with a jumbo package and shifted from the right side to the left and then popped Des Reed through a hole on the right and he ran 72 yards for a touchdown. And without that play, they don't win the game. They had also converted a 4th and 5 at midfield earlier in the game on what would be a touchdown drive on a nice little Texas route by Des Reed. Like they get the 4th down and Cade Bell and Des Reed are like, what do you want to do? I don't know what you should do. I just get the ball to Des Reed. So that's been like that's their plan, is like push the envelope and push it with Des Reed. And then because you know who's also a slinger, Eli Holstein's a slinger.
Oh yeah.
So he will rip throws over the middle of the field. That guy loves to throw in the middle of the field. And sometimes he throws it to the other team. So he had a couple like really rough ones at times. He had also, I think it was the Pitt game. I watched so many games at 2:00 in the morning on Tuesday night. I got confused. I think it was him. He threw an interception. No, Cal had to punt out of its own end zone. Pitt took over like the 31-yard line. On the next play, Eli Holstein threw the ball into the end zone. There were 2 defenders standing there and no receiver because there was a miscommunication. Like they literally had a possession start at the 31 because Cal punted out of its own end zone and he threw a pick on the first play. That was like what are you doing, pick? And like it was just that kind of game. Here's the thing. Pitt's left tackle, Branson Taylor, and their left guard, Ryan Jacoby, both got hurt in the first quarter of that game and did not come back in. They are both listed on the depth chart this week as being back. They've had the extra week to prepare. And I may be willing not to give a pass, but to take a chunk of what was Pitt's worst offensive performance and say they were playing 2 backups on the left side of the line, basically for 3 quarters of the game, and it completely threw them off. And if they have those guys back, they'll be better again. Do you buy that?
I think that's fair. Yeah. I mean, Pitt's not overflowing, I think, with offensive line depth. So you take 2 starters out of there, that would certainly impact things.
Other thing to note with the Pitt offense is their kicker is a frickin' baller. Ben Sauls won the Cincinnati game with the field goal at the end. He kicked a 58-yarder against Cal. There are only 5 FBS kickers who are perfect on field goals this year, and he is one of them. He is 10 for 10. 1 of them in the 20s, 4 in the 30s, 2 in the 40s, and 3 in the 50s. Plus, he's made all 28 of his extra points. He's a weapon. And so, like, Pitt's kicker could win them the game. And that matters for this offense.
Yeah, he could. Because I think it's going to be a close game, I think, right? I think it's going to be like back and forth. And Fran Brown was actually talking about this after the what was the game they just played? NC State.
Yeah.
Cuse was up 24-7 with 10 minutes left in the fourth quarter and ended up being a 24-17 win. Against UNLV, Syracuse had a lead in the third quarter and then ended up having to come back in the fourth quarter. And Fran Brown, after the NC State game, said, we just got to learn how to stop losing. A lot of the things that we've done towards the end of the game, it's still like, quote, guys, we've still got that losing mentality. And then Kyle McCord, in assessing the same thing, said, we take our foot off the gas. So,
okay,
I think this will be another, and like Syracuse beat UNLV, right? And it ended up beating NC State.
Great
couldn't
win.
get the stop. It couldn't get the stop it needed at the end of the game against Stanford. That was a different game entirely, though. They just kind of played bad that whole game. But like Pitt has also been in a lot of close kind of like nail biter games and pulled them out too. So I think it's really gonna come down to, I think, which of these two teams is most equipped to handle that kind of situation. And I guess right now you'd say it's Pitt, but it's not like Syracuse is over in that area either. They have won some tight games.
I do think the Pitt defense, no great defense in this game. I think the Pitt defense is a little better than the Syracuse defense. I don't think the Syracuse defense is that good. And their best player's been out since week 2. And Marlo Wax, their linebacker, is not going to be back yet. He might be back next week.
Yeah.
Can I give a shout out to what I thought was a great little header in the game notes? We know these SIDs, these sports information directors, they work their butts off. They go to games, they work 9 to 5. They're dealing with jerk media people like me. And then they're also producing these game notes. So they had a header about Marlo Wax missing time and maybe coming back. And the headline was wax on, wax off.
Nice. Love it. Shout out, Mr. Miyagi.
Shout out. So they moved Justin Barron from safety to linebacker to replace Marlo Wax, and he was the ACC linebacker of the week in their last game. So like they also might get back a corner this week. Marcellus Barnes has been out for much of the year, and he could be back. So like they have some moving parts here. They've also lost a couple guys in the defensive line. Fadil Diggs, the Texas A&M transfer, we talked about him a lot in the preseason. He's good. Clarence Lewis, I think, is the guy. He's like their best corner. He's the guy that gave it up on 4th down against Stanford. But Fran Brown said after the game they put him in a terrible position. It's not a great defense.
No.
And so early in the year, they were getting run on. They gave up 262 on the ground in the opener against Ohio. That has not been as much of a thing. NC State ran 21 times for 82 yards. The week before that, UNLV ran 25 for 127. The week before that, Holy Cross ran 25 for 9 yards. But now they're getting thrown out. NC State threw for 330. So like this is going to be a shootout on both sides. But if it comes down to getting a stop, I believe in the Pitt defense to get a stop more than I do the Syracuse defense.
I do too, because Pitt, I think, is still pretty good up front. Like they do get after it a little bit. Pitt sacked Cal 6 times in that game a couple weeks ago. It's top 10 in the country in pressure rate. And Kyle McCord has taken some sacks, which I think is more of a reflection of he's just dropping back a lot than it is Syracuse can't block anybody. But I don't think Syracuse has a great offensive line. So if it gets to a point where like Pitt's defense has to go out there and stop Syracuse to win the game, I think maybe the pass rush could do it for Pitt. Nate Matlack is a really good pass rusher. He leads the team in pressures. Kyle Lewis, we talked about, is a good pass rusher from the linebacker position. Jimmy Scott is a guy who has 4 sacks for them. I think there's just a little more front 7 talent at Pitt than there is at Syracuse.
Now, one of the big things last year was with Kyle McCord, and you talked about it a lot, was Kyle McCord clean was good. Kyle McCord pressured was not. His numbers against pressure are much better this year.
Way better.
Than they were last year at Ohio State. So like that is, again, whatever that is, comfort, experience, confidence, offensive line, belief,
he can move better. Yeah.
Like all those things that was a bugaboo for him, and it's not. So yes, Pitt can get after it, but just because you get after Kyle McCord doesn't mean you're going to get to him, and it doesn't mean he's not going to get you. So can we start the game? Let's go. For real. Sometimes I am enough in this bubble now Did you watch the Ari and Andy show, by the way?
I haven't watched it yet. No.
Okay. So I was on with Andy Staples and Ari Wasserman on the Wednesday morning show. We taped it on Tuesday afternoon. So much yelling. So what happened was, so I would recommend, so like if you want to see somebody fight for the North, you might want to go watch that, because my speech the other night about how there's nothing in the South that scares us anymore, Andy Staples like clipped that out, and then they put like photos behind it, and they played that first, and then I came on and he started screaming at me like immediately. and Ari was like, "Oh my God, why is this happening? I want to hide." And I was like, "Let's go, let's scream." You and I don't scream at each other enough. So it was 40 minutes of screaming about whether the SEC stinks or not.
Can I say that almost simultaneously, you and Ari messaged me. It must have been right when the interview was over. And Ari said, "We just had Doug on." He and Andy screamed at each other for 40 minutes. And then you messaged me and said, "I was just on with Andy and Ari. We screamed at each other for 40 minutes." And you, it was just a text, but I was inferring glee from you and a little bit of, I don't know what from Ari. He seemed very conflicted.
I will say I like shouting and yelling and screaming, but usually, if I want to have that, I have to start it. So this time, like, I didn't have to feel bad about starting it because he started it, but I was ready.
Yeah.
So I thought it was super fun. So anyway, and we got to have Ari back on so that Ari can get to talk too. But like in my bubble, I think Pitt-Syracuse is the only thing people in college football are talking about this week. I'm like, how are you not? They're going to throw for 700 yards in this game. This is going to be a banger. And I actually don't know if that's the case.
I think people will be checked in. I'm looking to see. Do you think the Vikings play the Rams on Thursday night, which actually the Rams suck. I think this game will have a nice audience.
Yeah, I hope so. It's also really cool. Pat Narduzzi versus Fran Brown. We've heard those nice things that Pat Narduzzi said about Fran Brown. Pat Narduzzi is 58. Fran Brown is 42. Pat Narduzzi is in year 10. Fran Brown is in year 1. Pat Narduzzi is 71-50. Fran Brown is 5-1. Like, this is, I love this aspect of it too, right? And they're both Northern guys. They are both sons of the North, and they are exactly the guys who should be at these programs right now. Like, do not give up on Nardog. He is that guy. I think he's going to wind up as the winningest coach in Pitt history. He's at 71 now. The guy from the 30s is at 111. I think he gets another 40 at Pitt. Like, he is your guy. I know there was frustration about Pitt last year, but Pat Narduzzi's your guy. And Fran Brown, I thought coaching mistakes helped cost them the Stanford game. They should be undefeated too, but Fran Brown acknowledged that. I think he gets better every week. I think his players believe in him. I think he has made some really good hires. He clearly has brought in talent. He has transformed that program instantaneously, and he is exactly the guy that Syracuse needs. I just love this for the North, Landis, because I think there's real reason to believe in both these head coaches and both these programs.
I think so too. I don't know. Like, I think Pat Narduzzi is probably like right where he's supposed to be, right? Well, however this worked out,
yes.
he ended up kind of where he belongs. I don't know that you'd say that necessarily about Fran Brown, because maybe there's one other program that is a more obvious destination for Fran Brown, and that's Rutgers, but like, that's not going to happen anytime soon.
Right.
However, if you can't be at Rutgers, you might as well be at Syracuse if you're a guy with Jersey roots and East Coast recruiting ties. And I just think like an understanding of what it's going to take to win at a place like that too. So, I was close to being out on Pat Narduzzi after last year, and then just like not super confident he was going to let Cade Bell take this offense to places it needed to go, but I was wrong about that. And I think Pat Narduzzi has evolved a little bit too, which is saying a lot, because I don't think college coaches by their nature are always super willing to do that.
And I would just like to say, I always believed in you, Nardog.
You did. That's true.
Let's make our picks for this game. It has moved from a 5.5 point line to a 6 point line. It's Pitt -6. The over under is 62.5. And on our betting show on Friday mornings, T-Shoe has stats about how, like, when your total's over 60, like, it comes in under like 60% of the time. That's a lot of points, brother. So what do you have in this one, Landis?
Screw math. I got Pitt winning 42-38.
Let's go.
Yeah.
Can we go harder? Could we possibly go any harder than that? Could I love your score anymore? Let's go. All right. I have Pitt 30-28. So like we're in the same range. You're just like dialing it up 2 more scores for each team. That's a close game. And by the way, this is both Syracuse with the points. So if you're trying to bet it, I do think it's a 1-score game. And we've talked about this before, like last team with the ball, like somebody driving to win the game and somebody trying to get a stop.
Yeah.
Is that what we're thinking about here?
I think so. Yeah. And I don't know. Like I said, I think if it is Syracuse with the ball, I think Pitt can get the stop. If it's the other way around, I don't know that I trust Syracuse's defense as much to get the stop. But because of that dynamic, I'll take Pitt in a 1-score game.
But also, Syracuse has been tested here. Like they
100%.
They like the UNLV game again for that huge conversation that Godfrey and I had at the start about Boise UNLV. The 2 losses for those 2 teams, Boise lost to Oregon and UNLV lost to Syracuse. So like this is like that's an excellent win at UNLV. That's an excellent win for Syracuse. So like these are 2 offenses really truly to believe in. And I do. Pitt's going to be explosive by ripping intermediate throws or short throws and letting Des Reed go crazy. And Kyle McCord's going to be chucking it down the field to Aronde Gadsden and a bevy of receivers. So strap in, watch this game, 7:30 on Thursday night. We'll be there. And we would like to tell the folks, Landis, that if this game demands it and we are able to get a Wi-Fi signal, we might go live Thursday night because we want KOTN to own this game if there's something there to own.
Yeah, I think we will. Maybe if it's a blowout, we won't quite do it. But I don't think it's going to be. I think,
or if we can't get the Wi-Fi to work, if we can't.
I don't know. I've been to Pitt Stadium plenty of times, but I've never covered a game there, so I'm not entirely sure what to expect.
But the Pitt sports information people are great, and they've been super helpful, and we're super excited to be there. And come find us on Thursday night if we can do it and if it's worth it. All right, quick break. When we come back, kind of the same deal with Cincinnati, Colorado. We'll do all of that next on Kings of the North. Doug and Bill, KOTN, Cincinnati and Colorado, 2-5-2 teams, both with 1 loss in the Big 12. And this Big 12 race is real, Landis. And so we'll talk about this first, just like we did with Syracuse Pitt, like how much this really matters to what is going on in the Big 12, because we've got a lot of undefeated teams and we've got a lot of 1-loss teams. And like, is it fair to say that you think the winner of Colorado Cincinnati is going to remain in the thick of this race?
Definitely. Cincinnati's got a real opportunity here. Playing Colorado, playing Iowa State, playing Kansas State still. All on the road. So a difficult opportunity, but an opportunity nonetheless. Yes, and then I guess like BYU's played its toughest games, right? So that's the hurdle here, I guess, for anybody who's trying to stay in the race is that BYU probably has the best path forward, but everybody else just about has at least 1 game of note remaining against these other contenders.
BYU and Iowa State, both 4-0 in the Big 12. Kansas State, Cincinnati, Colorado, and Texas Tech, all 3-1. Let me just double check real quick. Let me look at that graphic here. North, south.
Huh. You got it.
6. So let me double check. How many teams are in the Big 12? Is it 16? I believe it's 16 in the Big 12, right?
More than 12. Yeah.
And I believe there are 8 that we claim as the North, and there are 8 in what we discard as the South. And again, to double check, 6 teams in the race, 5 North, 1 South. So we don't cram the southern half of the Big 12 as much as we cram the SEC. I would just like to say the southern half of the Big 12 can cram it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. It's almost like it's not even worth telling them to cram it because the North is so much better than the South in the Big 12 already. It almost feels like punching down a little bit. Yeah. But we'll do it. They can cram it.
Oh, yeah. And like this is 5 of the 8. Utah and Kansas were in the discussion at the beginning of the year. and have fallen off for various reasons. But the North rises up. The games that matter, we have Cincinnati at Colorado this weekend. We have Texas Tech at Iowa State on November 2nd. Colorado at Texas Tech on November 9th. I almost didn't want to put the Texas Tech games in here. I think they're like fraudulent. They're just a product of their early schedule, but whatever. They have one conference loss. Cincinnati at Iowa State on November 16th, banger. Cincinnati at Kansas State on November 23rd, banger. Kansas State at Iowa State on November 30th. Hide the children. Let's go. Mm-hmm. Godfrey was like, he thinks the bill's coming due for Cincinnati. I am not there on that. Do I think Cincinnati's better than these teams? No. Do I think Cincinnati can do something against these teams? Yes. I don't think this is soft, what Cincinnati has done when their 2 losses are by a combined 4 points. And I think it's real. Do you think it's real? Is it soft?
I think I agree with both of you that it's not. I don't think it's fake. I don't find it to be soft, but I also don't think Cincinnati is better than any of these 3 teams it has to go play on the road. Yeah. So it probably will not work out in Cincinnati's favor.
Okay, so we split it up, and I thought, who does Bill want to talk about more, Shedeur Sanders or Brendan Sorsby? And it just felt like a Brendan Sorsby kind of week for you. And I was more than happy to talk about Shedeur Sanders because I got a lot to say about that. So Cincinnati offense versus Colorado defense for you.
I am happy to talk about Brendan Sorsby because I think his legs might matter greatly here. It's been kind of a weird rushing profile for Brendan Sorsby. He has 6 rushing touchdowns, but he's not really run wild on teams. And maybe he's just not that kind of runner, or they're not asking him to be. But I think that he could be, both scrambling and then a designed run game. I think he can be a guy that is more than merely just sort of like a red zone weapon, which is kind of feels like Cincinnati has done with him for the most part. And Colorado has surrendered some quarterback rushing yards this year, maybe most notably to Avery Johnson at Kansas State. And I don't think Brendan Sorsby is quite that kind of runner. But the thing for Cincinnati, I guess against anybody, but especially in this matchup is, and what maybe juxtaposes it to what we just talked about with Syracuse especially, is Cincinnati is fairly balanced, right? Like, you have to worry about Sorsby running and throwing. Absolutely. You have to worry about Xavier Henderson and Joe Royer as receivers. And you have to worry about Corey Kiner, and I think to some extent even Evan Pryor when Cincinnati wants to run the ball. And I think Cincinnati's offensive line is not bad. Luke Kandra is very good, well, maybe the best guard in the country. And the rest of the offensive line, I think, is okay.
I think there's just very veteran.
Just a lot. Yeah, there's a lot to contend with there for Colorado's defense, which is good, and probably we're not talking enough about just how much better that defense is. I just think a lot of what they've done in the portal, especially on the front, has worked well for Deion Sanders and that group. Like, they're getting after quarterbacks. I wouldn't say they're shutting down the run, but I don't know that they're getting run all over by teams either. Maybe they haven't. DJ Giddens ran pretty well on them, but I think for the season they're not getting destroyed in rushing production defense, which they did last year. So I don't know. I think it's a pretty solid Colorado defense, but this is another test for them. It's not their most difficult test, because I think Kansas State is better, although Cincinnati might have better receiving weapons than Kansas State does. So I don't know. I think it has to be a game where Brendan Sorsby uses his legs some. I don't know. So Travis Hunter is supposed to play. Like Deion Sanders said, he's going to play. He's missed time the last couple of weeks with a shoulder injury.
Hey! I get to talk about Travis Hunter. No, I'm just kidding. No, it's we're fighting over Travis.
We both do. Well, I think at least for my purposes, it's he's going to play, but then okay, how much is he going to play on defense? Because he only played 10 snaps on defense against Arizona last week. And if he's going to play his full complement of snaps, which is just playing every snap on both sides of the ball, then it could be just that Travis Hunter follows Xavier Henderson everywhere he goes, and then Colorado says, beat us with somebody else. Xavier Henderson, who has 53 targets and leads 59 targets, 41 receptions to lead Cincinnati. He's a really good receiver. Then I think it's just like beat us with Joe Royer, beat us with your running backs. And I think Cincinnati can, but if you can make Cincinnati play a little bit with a hand tied behind its back, if you can maybe have just Travis Hunter, I don't know, I don't want to say lock down Xavier Henderson, but maybe it is that, then I'm not entirely sure what Cincinnati does to counter that. On the other hand, Colorado shut down Noah Fafita and Tedero McMillan in a game where Travis Hunter only played 10 snaps. So maybe they don't even need Travis Hunter to do that. But I could see that being the plan, provided Travis Hunter plays on defense the way we think he's going to.
Deion Sanders quotes on Travis Hunter: he's healthier, he has more, quote, pep in his step, and he's on point. So this is like all things that, again, he was playing like 120 snaps a game for the first 5 weeks, and he's played like 50 snaps the last 2 weeks. I don't know that we'll get to 120, but I think we'll be more than 50 total. Is probably somewhere between 50 and 120 is where we land. I do think it's interesting. I think both these staffs made good defensive coordinator hires in the offseason that helped these defenses get better. I don't think so. Again, there's a lot of comparisons here. We're not going to have quite the same like head coaching breakdown, but Scott Satterfield and Deion Sanders are both second-year guys, and they both changed defensive coordinators after year one. And Colorado brought in Robert Livingston from the Bengals, and Cincinnati brought in Tyson Veit from Iowa State, and I think both have been effective. And I don't think either defense is great, but I think they're both better.
I think they're both probably maximizing what they can be given their personnel, right? Which is still, I think that leaves Colorado somewhat significantly better off. Colorado is 38th in defensive efficiency, FEI, and Cincinnati is 54th.
Yeah.
By the way, overall, these two teams
in the hundreds last year, were they not?
Yeah. Overall, just efficiency, like margins, offense, defense. Cincinnati's 32nd, Colorado's 34th. They're pretty evenly matched.
Yeah. So I do think, talking about though, if we flip it to Colorado offense versus Cincinnati defense, I don't think Cincinnati can cover these guys.
I agree.
I think that's really what this game is about. So Colorado's had some receiver injuries, but I think they'll be okay. LeJontay Wester's been okay. He had a big game last time out. If Hunter's back, and if he's going to play more on one side, it will be on offense. Jimmy Horn's had some injury stuff, but I think he's okay. They've been hurt there at times, but I think they're okay. And it's just not to restate the obvious, but I still think we're in a situation where however good you think Shedeur Sanders is, he's better than that. Brendan Sorsby, this is just nice people saying nice things. Brendan Sorsby, the Cincinnati quarterback, said he's a great player and one of the best quarterbacks, if not the best quarterback in the country. I actually do think Shedeur Sanders is the best quarterback in the country.
I agree with that. I think he is sometimes put into positions where he has to make some risky plays, and you might watch those snaps and think to yourself, like, what is he doing? Like he does take some huge sacks, like just backpedaling, trying to create a play, and then all of a sudden he's lost 16 yards on a play, right? So those are the kind of things you would point to and say, like, well, what's that about? But throw for throw, I don't think there's anybody in the country who can spin it like Shedeur Sanders can. Like, he makes some ridiculous throws and multiple of them every single game.
They gave up a gazillion sacks last year. So last year they gave up 4.7 sacks a game. Colorado did. That was 132nd in the country. This year they're 129th in the country. They're giving up 3.6 sacks per game. So that's one fewer sack per game. But these are their sack numbers by game: 1-5, 1-8, 2-6-1. So they've had 4 normal games and 3 insane games.
So they're due.
They're due. And guess what? They get sacked by the good teams. So they gave up 5 sacks to Nebraska, 8 to Baylor in the miracle game that they forced overtime on the Hail Mary and then won, and then 6 to K-State. So the 3 games where they give up sacks are 2 losses and a miracle wins. When they don't give up sacks, they win easily. The offensive line is better. He's that kind of quarterback, I think, by instinct and by necessity. And I kind of like those guys. Justin Fields is like that. Russell Wilson is like that. I am not letting Aaron Rodgers is like that. I am not letting go of this ball, because when I let go of it, that means I can't make a play anymore. And if I hold on to it, I still have a chance to do something spectacular. Their offensive line is not as much of a sieve. They kind of did a weird thing last week where they rotated both guard spots. And Deion said they were just kind of like looking for something to click, but they kind of like almost did hockey lines at the 2 guard spots. The tackles, I think, are better. Like the offensive line is better compared to a year ago, even though the sack numbers are still bad nationally, but still also one fewer per game than last year, right? So as much the offensive line at Colorado was like one of the top 10 stories in college football last year. It's not that. It's not great, but it's not as bad as it was.
It's not as bad as it was, although you can tune into a Colorado game at the right time against the right team and think that it is. Like I think of the Nebraska game, right? When Nash Hutmacher and Ty Robinson just destroyed that Colorado offensive line. And I like Dante Corleone is better than both those guys.
He is.
He doesn't have a clone playing next to him, but I wonder if the Nebraska recipe is at all replicable for Cincinnati, which is just like our monster up front has this covered. We're dropping 8 and good luck finding a place to throw the ball.
Eric Phillips also gets pretty good pressure for them off the edge. He has 26 pressures, which is 9th among Power 4 edge rushers. Dante Corleone, who's an All-American candidate, is tied for 5th among P4 defensive tackles and pressures with 20. He's awesome. He was all KOTN. The defense is better. Last year, adjusted EPA per play for Cincinnati, they were 126. This year, they're 45th, right? So like they went from really not that good to okay. I just don't think they can cover. Jordan Young's a pretty good corner on one side. He's given up 7 catches on 20 targets. So that's 35% catch rate for him. All the other corners have a 65% catch rate. I don't think they have enough depth in the secondary. And we've seen it, right? You see what it looks like when a team has a good corner, but you can pick on the other spots. I think Shedeur Sanders is going to find the spots here. Cincinnati has given up 28 pass plays of 20 yards or more, which ranks 119th in the nation. They've given up 5 pass plays of 50 yards or more, and they haven't necessarily played all great quarterbacks. They've really given up some big ones, and it's just funny. Like they held Arizona State. Cincinnati did to 155 passing yards in their last game. That was Jeff Sims, the backup for Arizona State. I'm not sure any defense will see a bigger gap in quarterback level play from game to game than Jeff Sims to Shedeur Sanders.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Like it is. So like they thought they played a bad game at Texas Tech. Scott Satterfield said they had 40 missed assignments in the Texas Tech game that they lost 44-41. And they feel like they've been getting better at that. So I do think like up front, I think they're good. Linebacker, I think they're getting better. I just think it's a bad matchup from a passing attack and a pass coverage standpoint. And I think it is the Achilles heel of this game for either side.
Yeah, I think that's probably right. Because even in the games, in some games, maybe even most games, where Shedeur Sanders is really getting hounded and teams are getting after him, he still finds ways to complete passes. Like, he still finds ways to finish with 300 passing yards and 3 touchdowns. So, I think he will do that here, even if I believe Cincinnati might be able to pressure him a decent amount with Corleone and Phillips.
And it was one of those things. He takes sacks, but he doesn't throw picks. He doesn't make bad throws. So that's one of those things too. Sometimes you give something up. Usually if you want to make big throws, you're going to have to give something up. You're either going to have to be willing to risk some picks, or you're going to have to take some sacks. And I'd rather take sacks than risk picks. So I'm okay with like his balance of how he does this. He's made 18 big time throws with his 4th in the Power 4. He's only made 4 turnover worthy plays. That's the same number as Cade McNamara, who has 5 big time throws. Like he does not make mistakes once he lets the ball go. And by the way, he's awesome when he's clean. If you don't get pressure on him, he will destroy you. But he's still pretty good when he's blitzed. And Cincinnati doesn't blitz a ton. They've usually blitz around 25% of the time. They've had 2 games this year where they blitz more than half the time against Pitt, and Eli Holstein actually was pretty good against the blitz in that game, and then against Houston, where they just destroyed Houston and shut them out. So I do think it's possible. Like, would you let it rip? Right? It's not that Shedeur Sanders is bad under pressure. It's that he is unstoppable when he's clean. I think Cincinnati has to take some risks and try to blitz.
Yeah, I think they will. You just don't, if you don't trust your one-on-one matchups anyway, sort of in whatever situation you're in, you might as well try to blitz and get after Shedeur before he has time to make a read.
Yeah, and so he'll make throws down the field. Overall, Shedeur Sanders, his PFF grade at quarterback is 2nd in the Power 4 to Cam Ward. He's just like watch this game, right? I On an entertainment scale, I think we believe Pitt-Syracuse might be a 10 out of 10. I think Colorado-Cincinnati might be a 9.5.
I think it could be, because I think I 100% agree with you that I don't believe Cincinnati's going to be able to cover Colorado and stop that passing offense. And I think whether it's running or throwing, I think Cincinnati will find ways to be explosive too. And I think it could be running the ball. Like Corey Kiner has 51 missed tackles forced this year. That's second in the country behind Ashton Genty. And there are times where you watch Colorado play where like they can't tackle. Like they over pursue. They wrap too high. Like Shiloh Sanders, I think, is good for 4 critical missed tackles a game. Like it's just like they put him in those spots to keep trying to make those plays. And I don't think he's that good. And then Evan Pryor, who I mentioned earlier, has been a big play running back for Cincinnati. He only has 31 carries. 5 of them have gone for 30 yards or more. He has 4 touchdowns. 63 of them are 65-yarder, 64-yarder, and a 52-yarder, 55-yarder. So like doesn't get the ball a ton, but when he does, he's a big play threat. I think both teams are going to be able to be explosive in this game.
But specifically to that, Cincinnati runs the ball 10 times better than Colorado does.
Oh, yeah.
I said we weren't going to talk about Colorado. They average 75 rushing yards per game. That's 130th out of 134 teams. They average 2.7 yards per carry. That's 129th. And they average 28 rushing attempts per game. That's 128th. And their last game against Arizona, they actually had 3 backs combined for 35 carries for 155 yards. But that's because they were up 28-7 at the half, and they just kind of grounded out. The game before that against Kansas State, which I know we talked about on the show, they threw for 388 and ran for -29.
Yeah. There was a sack in there where Shedeur lost like 20 yards.
Okay. But still, you have a lot of chances to kind of get that back and get into plus territory. They threw 40 passes in that game and ran it 19 times. I don't think they're gonna like what we I think it might be like if they have 60 plays, I think it might be 50-10. Well, I don't think they'll even try. They'll use the passing game as a running game. They'll throw bubbles. They'll flip stuff to guys. They're not going to try to run. So,
no, they had the one. Was it like one game where I thought they tricked me into thinking their rushing attack was rounding into something, and then that turned out to not be the case.
It was not. But like if we somehow and it's like it's not like you have to match that, but like if somebody needs to like put a drive together on the ground for some reason, it's definitely going to be Cincinnati. So I think it'll be a good game. I think it is a tough spot, and it's been a good crowd at Colorado this year, right? Like that Kansas State managed to win, but that was an excellent crowd for that game. Colorado is favored by 5.5 at home. The total on this is 57. So what's your pick for this, Landis?
More points. I got Colorado 42-35.
My God, let it rip. My gosh.
I'm manifesting shootouts.
77. You're 20 points over the total. I'm Colorado 33-26. So I'm at 59. I'm barely over the total. So both these games that we broke down today that really matter for their conference races, we have high scoring 1-score games.
Which means they'll be 13-0 and 20-11.
Yeah. I really like try it. Like, and it's just like the windows on this. You get a Thursday night, then you get like a 10:15 Eastern Saturday night. So you should find opportunities. Like you should be able to watch both these games. And we would just really recommend it. And we just don't want them to fly under the radar, which was why we gave them enough space here on Wednesday to do that. So we've made 2 picks on this Wednesday show. Thursday is going to be the typical thing that we do where we run through all the picks in the North, and we'll do big game breakdowns, as we said, on UNLV, Boise, Oregon, Illinois, and Notre Dame, Navy. And guess what we did not do on here for the second straight week, Landis? We did not do what you're watching, what you eat, and what you're thinking. We did it on our local show the last 2 weeks on Kings of Columbus, frankly. So if you really want to know like what Bill Landis has been eating, you can find that on a separate channel. It's on the podcast, YouTube and podcast channel. Maybe you're not an Ohio State football fan, but you want to know what we saw on streaming services. It's just the last 20 minutes of that show, just like it was last week. There's too much ball to talk about in the North. We haven't been able to do the nonsense.
And we're not going to do a 3-hour show, at least not yet. So we'll get there. Okay. We'll get there eventually.
Yeah. But let's do this. I promise you what you're watching, what you eating, what you're thinking on this show next Wednesday. I promise you that. And I actually kind of have a plan for it possibly. So like, I will promise you that. We've got to have fun here, but we think talking ball about great, awesome Northern matchups is fun. So that's just as fun as frozen pizza.
I'm watching and thinking about Northern ball. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm eating up Pitt-Syracuse on Thursday. I'm going to be eating so much Pittsburgh stuff. So my older daughter is a huge Justin Fields fan. And so when I ate at a Permanente Brothers in Pittsburgh, I got on their email list. So if you don't know what Permanente Brothers is, it's like a Pittsburgh-based restaurant where they do a lot of cool sandwiches and they put French fries on your sandwich, right? We've talked about it here on this show before. So after Pittsburgh benched Russell Wilson I benched Justin Fields and put in Russell Wilson, I got an email from the Pittsburgh Permanente Brothers about their new Russ sandwich that they named their sandwich after Russell Wilson. And I sent it to my daughter, and she was like dropping F-bombs about these guys that how dare they do this to Justin Fields. But I'm probably going to go eat that sandwich in Pittsburgh on Thursday, if that's okay. Can we go by there?
We can absolutely go to Permante's. Yeah, because we have to get Mike Kadick, and we had him on a Big Ten Media Days. He gave us the order, so I got to go back and listen to it and then order.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, we're going to a Pittsburgh game. There's so many Pittsburgh people in the North right now. Kurt Cignetti and Mike Kadick, like they're Pittsburgh and up. Bloomington, Indiana. Okay. So sorry we didn't get to watch you here on this show, but we just are so excited about what's going on in Northern football right now. We appreciate everybody being here. Give us a thumb, subscribe, tell a friend, go watch me yell at Andy Staples and Ari Wasserman if you want. It was a really fun conversation, and we just are excited about Northern football. We're not going to apologize for that. Thanks to our producer, Mike Urostowski, as always, for making us look good and sound good. Maybe we'll see you Thursday night. Maybe after that game, we'll definitely see you Thursday afternoon, noon Eastern, live on YouTube for all our picks. And then we will definitely do the Saturday night show live, 11 p.m. Eastern, and we'll have our betting show on Friday morning. For Bill Landis, I'm Doug Lesmerises, and that was Kings of the North.